Have you ever felt something real before a single word was spoken, a gaze across a crowded room that didn't ask for attention, it recognized you, a slow, silent closeness that asked for no promises, just presence? This isn't just a love story, it's a remembering. It's about the way trust settles between breaths, the way hands don't rush, but wait. Here, we share true love stories that go deeper than desire stories, where connection begins in silence, touch is sacred, and waking up beside someone feels like being seen for the first time. If your heart aches for more than just fantasy, if it craves real, raw soul, awakening love, you're in the right place. Welcome to the space where strangers become everything in one night, where deep love doesn't shout, it whispers. Subscribe now, because your story might begin just like this. He was leaning against the far end of the room, half shadowed by the dim amber lights above the bar, his fingers wrapped loosely around a glass he hadn't touched in a while. There were voices all around, music low, laughter rising and falling like waves, but the moment his eyes met mine, it all seemed to fade. The world didn't go silent, it simply quieted enough for that one glance to echo louder than everything else. It wasn't a stare, it wasn't bold or searching. It was soft, steady, almost hesitant, like someone looking through a window they didn't know was open. It wasn't about beauty or charm or being impressed. There was no judgment, no curiosity to dissect who the other was, just presence, familiarity, like something ancient inside had just stirred and whispered, "Oh, there you are." The air shifted in that moment. It was real, not imagined, the kind of shift that happens when two energies silently agree to step toward each other. There wasn't a single word yet, not a smile, not a signal, not a conscious invitation. Just that strange, wordless gravity pulling one step closer, and then another. Every step across the room felt like walking towards something already written, not planned, but remembered, like walking into a dream I didn't know I'd had, one that had lived in the back of my mind all along. He didn't rush the first word. It wasn't some clever line or rehearsed phrase. Just something honest, low, almost cautious, like someone trying not to break whatever had already begun in the silence. His voice didn't try to impress. It simply joined the moment that already existed between us, and something about that made it all the more real. There's a strange purity in meeting someone before you know anything about them, before history gets in the way, before details cloud the view. That night, there were no roles to play, no expectations, just two people standing in the kind of quiet that makes everything loud inside, heartbeats, thoughts, longings we don't speak aloud. The conversation drifted easily, but it was never about the words. It was how it felt to speak, how natural it felt to sit a little closer without needing a reason. His smile wasn't trying to charm, and mine wasn't trying to hide. There was no performance, just presence. Just that steady unfolding of something both strange and safe. At some point, he reached for his glass, but his fingers brushed mine instead. Neither of us pulled away. It wasn't calculated. It just happened. That brief electric contact, not intense, but deeply known. Like two puzzle pieces clicking into place without effort. The world didn't shatter, it just shifted again. There was no rush between us. No pressure to impress or seduce. The most intimate thing that happened in that moment wasn't a kiss. It was letting silence fall between us and not needing to fill it. That kind of comfort doesn't come from charm. It comes from something much rarer, recognition. The kind that lives in the spaces between words, in the way someone breathes when they're not trying to be anything other than real. The first smile between us wasn't about flirtation. It was quiet, slow, the kind that rises from a place of understanding. It didn't ask for anything. It didn't promise anything. It just said, "I see you. I don't know why, but I do." I remember the way he looked down, just for a second, as if something in him had softened unexpectedly, like he'd been caught off guard by the depth of a moment he hadn't prepared for. I felt it too. That little tremble inside when you realize something real is happening. and it's not in your control. There's a kind of vulnerability in being truly seen, not because someone has asked questions, but because they haven't needed to. Because they looked at you and something in them just knew. Later, when the crowd thinned and time stretched into the quiet hours, we found ourselves outside not to escape, but to breathe. The night was cool, stars scattered above like distant witnesses to something unfolding. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew this wasn't just chemistry. It wasn't just attraction. It was something slower, deeper, more sacred. He stood beside me, close but not too close, letting the silence linger again. I didn't want to speak. I didn't want to break whatever soft, invisible thing had wrapped itself around us. But he turned to me then, and in the gentlest voice I've ever heard, he said, "It feels like I've known you before." And I felt it. In every part of me, that quiet ache not of longing, but of remembering. It wasn't about needing someone. It wasn't about filling a void or chasing a story. It was simply this: sometimes the soul knows before the mind does. Sometimes love doesn't begin with a spark. It begins with recognition. And that night, it didn't matter that we'd been strangers hours before, because the moment his eyes met mine, everything changed. It's strange how silence can say more than words. That night, silence wasn't awkward. It wasn't heavy or demanding. It just existed soft, patient, like it had been waiting a long time for two people to step inside it. There was no rush, no question of what comes next, just the quiet rhythm of two people breathing in the same space, slowly learning each other without needing to define anything. There was warmth between us that had nothing to do with touch. It was in the way he listened, really listened, even when I wasn't speaking. In the way his eyes didn't wander, didn't scan the room for something better or easier. They stayed, not out of obligation, but out of presence. That's what it felt like. He was there, fully, with every part of him. We didn't reach for each other right away. There was a sacredness to the stillness, the way his hand rested on the table, close but not too close, like an invitation waiting to be accepted or not. And that mattered, that he didn't push, didn't lean in before the moment was ready. He read the room, but more than that, he read me without pressure, without any agenda. There was something deeply intimate about it. Not physical, not yet. Emotional, spiritual, like the space between us had to be honored before it could be crossed. He asked things, but not to dig. He asked like someone who wanted to understand gently, slowly, like unfolding the pages of a story that had been long closed. And when I hesitated, when I paused to find the words, he waited, not with impatience, but with grace. That kind of patience creates trust, the kind that doesn't ask for anything in return, just presence, just care. I could feel my guard softening in ways I hadn't expected. Not because I wanted something from him, but because I didn't feel the need to protect myself. There's a rare kind of safety in being around someone who doesn't need to be loud or strong to feel sure of themselves. He wasn't trying to impress me. He was just there, real, and that was enough. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. His voice didn't rise to fill space. It rested there, steady and low, like it belonged in the quiet. That's what I remember most, the quiet and how it never felt empty. At one point, our hands brushed briefly, lightly, and we both noticed, but neither of us rushed into that space. We just stayed where we were, letting that moment breathe. There's something deeply respectful about that, about not chasing a spark, but letting it flicker and find its own flame. And slowly, without even realizing when it began, that unspoken trust wrapped around us. It lived in the way we made room for silence, in the way our eyes met without flinching. It lived in the steadiness of his breath, in how he never tried to reach for more than what I was ready to give. I remember the first time he reached for my hand not like it was his right, but like it was a question, a quiet one, and I answered without words, just opened my hand and let his fingers find mine. It wasn't about sparks or butterflies, it was about grounding, about knowing that this, whatever it was, didn't need to be labeled or promised. It just needed to be real, and it was. We stayed like that for a long time. No urgency, no performance, just two people sharing a moment of rare honesty. There was something healing in it, something deeply human. It's not often you meet someone who feels like home before they ever touch you. That night, it wasn't about crossing boundaries. It was about building bridges, quiet ones, slow ones, made from breath and eye contact and the sacred rhythm of listening. And by the time skin finally met skin, the space between us had already been filled with trust. And that made all the difference. The room was quiet, but not empty. Shadows stretched across the floor like they had stories of their own. The light was soft, warm, almost golden. Everything around felt slower than usual, like time had agreed to step back and leave us alone, just for a while. There was no urgency in the way he looked at me, no flicker of expectation, no weight of what was supposed to happen next, just that same stillness he carried since the first moment, eyes that didn't ask for anything, but offered something. I still can't name. When he reached out, it wasn't bold or demanding. It was a question, a silent, trembling question asked with his fingertips, and somehow my breath answered before my voice ever could. I moved closer, not because it was expected, but because it felt inevitable, not like falling, like arriving. The first kiss didn't land like fireworks. It didn't shake the earth. It was slower, gentler, the kind of kiss that feels like it already knows you. His lips didn't rush to take. They waited, listened, met mine like a whisper against skin, like something ancient returning, not hungry, reverent. He kissed me like he knew it was the only language I hadn't forgotten. There's something spiritual about being touched by someone who doesn't touch you to feel pleasure, but to feel you, not your body, you. That night, it felt like every inch of me was being seen, even the parts I had long hidden. The ones buried beneath rolls, beneath years, beneath walls I stopped noticing I'd built. His hands didn't roam, they explored. They weren't looking for the quickest way to reach something physical. They moved like they were learning me, memorizing, remembering, and I let him. Not because I felt pressure or guilt or longing, but because something in me, something far older than skin, opened, the way petals unfold without force. The way oceans come forward to kiss the shore, not out of need, but rhythm. It wasn't lust. It wasn't performance. It was sacred. There were moments where we didn't move at all, just held each other. Just breathed, and those moments felt fuller than anything I'd known. Like everything inside had gone still just to listen to that nearness, heart against heart, warmth against warmth, no taking, no pretending. He didn't chase my body, he honored it, not like something to be conquered, but like something to be welcomed. Every kiss to my neck, every soft breath against my shoulder, every pause before his hand moved again, it all felt like prayer. I remember the way his forehead rested against mine. No words, just closeness, just the steady rhythm of two people exhaling the past, inhaling something brand new. It wasn't about how far things went. It was about how deeply they reached. And the strange thing is, there was no fear, not of being seen, not of being touched, because he didn't take from me. He waited to be invited, and when I invited him in, it wasn't with my body first. It was with trust. I'd forgotten what that felt like. We didn't talk much afterward, not because there was nothing to say, but because there was nothing that needed saying. He stayed beside me, fingers brushing the curve of my back, and I didn't flinch. I didn't close off. I didn't retreat. I just breathed with him, and for the first time in longer than I can remember, I felt whole, not because of what we did, but because of how he made me feel while doing it, like I was something worth being gentle with. That night didn't wake up desire. It woke up something older, something waiting, something sacred, something real. The morning light slipped through the curtains like a soft breath. It painted everything gold, the walls, the folds of the blanket, the edges of skin still warm from sleep. There were no loud thoughts, no rush to get up, no weight of wondering what it all meant, just the quiet realization that something had changed, not because of the night, but because of the connection. He was still sleeping beside me, his breathing even, his hand resting close not on me, but near enough that I could still feel it, even without touch. There was no awkwardness, no shift in the air. Just stillness, the kind that wraps around you like peace. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, letting the warmth of that stillness settle deep in my chest. There wasn't a single thought of what would happen next. Not fear, not fantasy, just now, just this moment as it was. The world outside the window didn't know anything had changed. The streets would still hum, people would still hurry, but inside, something had softened. Something had rooted itself quietly, like it had been there all along, just waiting for the right time to rise. It's strange how a single night can shift the way the soul feels in the body, not because of what happened, but because of who it happened with. Because of how it felt to be touched not just with hands, but with presence, to be looked at not with hunger, but with reverence, to be held like something already loved. I turned to look at him, expecting to feel something sharp or heavy guilt, doubt, maybe even fear. But it wasn't there. What I felt instead was gratitude, not for some fantasy, but for something real, for the way he had listened without interrupting, for the way he had kissed without rushing, for the way he had made the space feel like mine too. Even sleep had felt different. I hadn't drifted off with my guard up. I hadn't felt the need to turn away. I'd fallen asleep slowly, skin against skin, heart somewhere in between, and for once, I hadn't felt alone. And waking up, it didn't feel like after. It felt like something had just begun. I could have left quietly. I could have pulled the blanket back, tiptoed across the room, avoided the morning light and all that might follow. But I didn't. I stayed. Not because I had to, because I wanted to, because nothing about this felt disposable. Nothing about it felt like it should be erased or hurried. When his eyes opened, the first thing he did was smile, not wide, not dramatic. Just soft, real, and in that moment it was enough. We didn't speak right away. We didn't need to. The silence had become something we trusted. There was no sudden confession, no promises spoken just to fill the air. But there was something in the way he reached for my hand, not to hold it tightly, but just to find it, to rest in the space between fingers and morning. I think that's when I knew. This wasn't something I'd have to explain. It wasn't something I needed to name. It wouldn't need to be shown to anyone, posted, shared, made bigger than it was. Because what we'd found wasn't loud, it was quiet, but it was real. The kind of real that doesn't fade with time, even if the story doesn't play out the way the heart dares to hope. There was a moment, standing by the window, where I watched the sunlight stretch across the floor, and I thought, if nothing else ever happens beyond this, it's still enough, because I'll carry it with me, not like a scar, not like a wound, but like something sacred, a night that didn't break me, or blur me, or confuse me, but one that reminded me who I am when I am fully seen. And more than that, who I am when I am safe. We talked eventually about small things, about coffee and music, and whether it was too early to open the window wider. But beneath every word, the connection lingered, that gentle thread tying the silence of the night to the light of the morning. He didn't try to define it, and I didn't ask him to. That was the beauty of it. There was nothing to prove, only something to honor. Not every story asks to be written down. Some just want to be remembered. And this connection, this slow unraveling, this soft morning light on skin, still humming with trust, this would live quietly inside me. A truth without noise, a love without labels, not something to be explained, something to be felt forever. If that stirred something inside you, if it felt like a piece of your own untold story, don't let it go. Like, comment, and subscribe to stay close to these moments that speak to the soul. More stories like this are waiting, quiet, powerful, unforgettable. See you in the next one.